Hey kiddos, I have a really neat science activity for you and I to do together. It'll help us learn a little bit more about the ocean. Did you know that the ocean is broken up into zones or layers? There are 5 layers of the ocean, and they're named according to how much sunlight reaches each layer. In fact, which layer do you think gets the most sunlight? The layer at the top of the ocean. And which layer do you think gets the least amount of sunlight? The layer at the bottom. Well, this science experiment is going to demonstrate what those layers look like, and we get to learn a little bit more about something called density. Do you remember that word from yesterday's activity? Well, let's get started. To do this science experiment, you'll need a couple of things. You'll need a glass jar. You will need 5 cups and 5 spoons. It doesn't have to be paper and plastic, but that's what I have here. And then you'll want to have some blue food coloring. Now, if you have black food coloring, that's even better. Mrs. Stewart just had dark blue and light blue. You will also need some water. I have some water in this container. You will need vegetable oil, some dish soap, some light corn syrup, and last but not least, some rubbing alcohol. So these are all items that you can probably find around your house. Now, to get started, we are going to put the very first layer, the layer that you would find at the very bottom of the ocean. Do you know what that's called? It's called the trench layer. Now, I'm going to put this up right here and hope that you can see it okay. There we go. That says trench layer. Maybe if I slide this over a little bit. And the trench layer is going to be made up of corn syrup. So parents, it calls for 3/4 of a cup. I'm just going to put in about the same amount of liquid that I use for each one. So I think I'm going to fill this cup up. Oh, now corn syrup is very thick. I'm squeezing some in there. Do you hear it? There's not very much in there, so I'm trying to squeeze it out. Okay, once you have your corn syrup in your cup, you're going to take, if you have black food coloring, you'll want to use the black. I just have some dark blue, so I'm going to add lots of blue food coloring to my corn syrup. And then I'm going to take one of those 5 spoons, and of course I'm going to stir it up. Now, this is very thick. That corn syrup is very thick. It's very dense. It has a lot of particles that are very close together. This is going to be our trench layer. Now, the trench layer is at the very bottom of the ocean. And in fact, not many creatures live in the trench layer because it doesn't get any sunlight at all. I know that sea cucumbers live down there, and there are some other sea creatures. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna pour this dark blue corn syrup into our jar, and this is the trench layer. Okay, now we're going to set that aside. The next layer after the trench layer is called the abyss layer. I'm going to put that one up next. Now, the abyss layer gets a little more sunlight, okay? And so it's a little bit lighter. Now for the abyss layer, we're going to use 3/4 cup of dish soap. So now you want to get another cup. Take another cup. And once again, parents, I'm just pouring in about the same amount of corn syrup that I used. And my dish soap is already like a light green color here. But I want to take some of my blue food coloring, and I'm not going to add quite as much. I'm just going to add a little bit here. And I'm going to stir it around because remember, the abyss layer is not as dark as the trench layer. It gets a little bit more sunlight. There are more sea creatures that can live in the abyss. Okay, oh, I got some bubbles going on. Okay, I'm going to pour that in next. So we've got our trench layer and now our abyss. And I want to get all of that out. Now, I don't know if you can see so far, but I'm going to back this up just a little bit, and I'm going to zoom in here so that you can see that the bottom is very dark, but the next layer up is a little bit lighter. Okay, let's go to the next layer. The next layer is called the midnight layer. Now, it's a little bit lighter, you might have guessed that, than the abyss layer because it's getting more sun. Yes, so we are going to take 3/4 cup water. So I'm going to take my water now and another cup and put some water in there. This time I'm going to use a little bit more than what I used of the dish soap. And I'm just going to put one drop of my dark blue food coloring in there. I'm going to stir it around. It's looking blue. And now I'm going to pour it into my glass jar very carefully. Ooh, I'm noticing the bottom is dark and then it seems like it gets a little bit lighter, just like the midnight layer gets a little bit more sun than the abyss layer, so the water's a little bit lighter. Okay, are you ready for the next layer? The next layer is called the twilight layer, and of course it's a little bit lighter. Okay, so we just got done adding the midnight layer, which was our water. In the midnight layer, you would find some certain types of whales and octopus, maybe even sea stars. Well, now we're ready for the twilight layer. We need to get some vegetable oil for this next layer. Another cup here. Now, in the twilight layer, you would find maybe some squid and certain types of eels and tuna, maybe some crabs. Those are the types of creatures you would find in the twilight layer. Now we're going to use just our light blue food coloring, and I'm going to put a couple drops in there and mix up that vegetable oil. I noticed something. When I put the drops of food coloring in there, they're not really wanting to mix. Very interesting. In fact, I want to show you because this is really pretty cool. If you look inside my cup, you'll see there's just a bunch of speckles. Okay, I'm going to take that oil and I'm going to pour it in very carefully, very carefully. Oh, it's looking lighter, just like the water would be looking lighter because it's getting a little more sun. Okay, well, our very last layer is the sunlight layer. Now, this is a layer where probably a lot of the creatures that you love can be found in, like dolphins and sea turtles and sharks, oh my goodness, and certain types of fish like angelfish. So let's make our sunlight layer. Our sunlight layer is with 3/4 cup rubbing alcohol. We're going to take the last cup that we have. And we don't need very much food coloring in this one. Whew, I can smell that rubbing alcohol. It's very strong. So I'm just going to put 1 drop of food coloring in there. It's already starting to change colors. I'm stirring it around. And now I'm going to pour this in very carefully for our final layer of our ocean. So cool. I'm watching as these different layers are able to stay. I see the darkest layer, the trench layer. Let me get a close-up for you. There we go, that's a little bit better. I see the trench layer, I see the abyss, and then midnight and twilight and sunlight up at the very top. And remember, the sunlight layer gets the most sun. That's why it's called the sunlight layer, huh? And then the trench layer, the one at the very bottom, gets the least amount of sun. In fact, it gets no sunlight at all. Okay, kiddos, so we have the trench layer, the abyss layer, the midnight layer, twilight, and sunlight. It goes from darkest all the way up to lightest, just like the real ocean. And that's because the bottom layer, that trench layer, gets no sunlight at all. In fact, the trench layer is very, very cold. But the top layer, the sunlight layer, gets the most sun. It's the most comfortable and warmest for those fish to be swimming around in. In fact, it's the warmest for you or I to be swimming in around too. Well, I hope you had fun doing that experiment. I hope you'll give it a try and check out the 5 layers. I have one more question for you though before we go. Why do you think we were able to see all 5 of those layers using these different liquids? We used water, vegetable oil, dish soap, corn syrup, and rubbing alcohol. They were all different. And when you go to do this experiment, you'll see they're different in thickness and how you're able to stir them or not stir them as easily and how they pour out. There's a big word we talked about a little bit yesterday called density. And the density of these different liquids is all different. So the one down here at the bottom is the most dense, and it's able to stay all by itself here at the bottom and hold the next layer up, which was a little less dense. How cool is that? Well, I hope you had fun. Can't wait to see your layers of the ocean. Bye for now, kiddos.